By dessert, when my name still hadn't been called for a single gift, I slid the envelope under my plate, the one with the deed, the passcodes, and the list of board members who'd be taking my calls at midnight. The room thought I was the woman they could safely forget. I was about to show them who signed their paychecks without them ever knowing it. I'm 70 in 4 months. 69 going on stubborn. Everyone calls me Gammy, like I'm a porcelain thing for a curio cabinet. Fine. Let's set the table. It was Christmas. Snow like sifted sugar, a roast that could make saints weep, and my son Matthew's voice booming the way it used to when he practiced debate in our kitchen as a teenager, certain, theatrical, a little in love with his own echo. We were at his big new house with a staircase that curled like a ribbon. His wife, Kelsey, had arranged the living room like a stage, tree glowing, camera propped on a tripod for memories, candles in glass cylinders she insisted were unscented for the ambience. It was all tasteful. It was all rehearsed. Okay, Kelsey sang, palms clapping. It's time. Gift exchange. Boxes everywhere. Paper like winter confetti. Silver bows, berry red ribbon. Names read off, laughter rising in predictable pitches. For Matthew, a vintage watch from his father-in-law, because time is a story you wear on your wrist when you've made partner. For Kelsey, spa retreat and a little velvet box that held a necklace delicate as frost. For my granddaughter Lucy, a camera she gasped over, the kind that looks old but costs real money. For my grandson Oliver, a drone he was forbidden to fly in the house, so naturally he hovered it inches above my bun until I batted it away with the serving spoon. For cousins, for friends, for neighbors who arrived late and already had their hands out. Everyone received something. Everyone but me. It would have been funny if it weren't so familiar. I didn't say anything at first. I smiled. I refilled the gravy boat. I asked Lucy to show me the features on her faux vintage camera and told Oliver that drones were just fancy kites, which enraged him and delighted me. I made small talk about weather and traffic and how the turkey had somehow both browned and stayed moist, a rare and enviable balance, much like raising children who respect their mothers. But the names kept coming and mine never did. Mom, Matthew said, halfway through the last stack, the kids will show you what they got when we're done, okay? He said it with the brisk kindness people use with airline attendants, sincerely polite, but in a hurry to get somewhere else. Of course, I said. I love seeing them happy. Gammy, Kelsey cooed, if you need anything, call for me. Don't get up. So I didn't. Here is what they didn't know, what no one in that room knew. I had never once been what I seemed. I was 19 when I married Matthew's father, and if you ask me why, I'll tell you I was in love, and also his mother made cinnamon rolls that could convert atheists. He died when Matthew was 12. Car accident, a storm, a phone call that turned my bones to water. Life was something to carry after that, not something that carried me. I learned to repair the house with my own hands. I learned to make a dollar whisper. I learned what I could do without. Then I learned what I could do with very little. It started with a laundromat. People laughed when I signed the lease. People always laugh when they can't see your math. I had exactly enough to replace the machines, repaint the walls, and put in a little library of books for kids so their mothers could read aloud while quarters churned away in metal bellies. I made it clean. I made it bright. I stocked the change machine with candy right at eye level for toddlers who needed a bright bribery to behave. I put a bulletin board by the door and rented the space to local handymen and piano teachers and dog walkers. It was never just a laundromat. It was a corridor where money passed through other people's hands and left a little of itself behind for me. That corridor became a hallway. The hallway opened into rooms. The laundromat turned into 2 more, then a strip mall with a bakery no one thought would survive because it was on the wrong side of town, until we put a coffee window in for the college kids. My first hire was a woman named Carla who could fix a coin-op dryer with a hair tie and a screwdriver, and who hugged me like she understood that touching another person might keep them from disintegrating. We dreamed bigger. We bought a failing logistics company that insisted traffic was its enemy. We reframed traffic as inventory you could see. We subcontracted drivers and taught them to treat their routes like chessboards. We called vendors on Sunday nights and asked them what they needed Monday morning and then delivered before the question ended. We were not gentle. We were reliable. That company paid for Matthew's pre-law summer abroad. He never asked where the tuition money came from. Maybe I never told him firmly enough. Maybe I enjoyed being the invisible hand. Maybe, if I am unkind to myself, I wanted to be needed more than I wanted to be known. You might be wondering, if I built all that, why was I sitting at my son's Christmas ignored? Because when life gives you a hammer, you fix things until everyone around you thinks the house just stands by itself. And because I didn't put my name on what I built. I put my trust in a trust. I hid behind managers. I used an old nickname I once hated as the LLC's founder, GMY Holdings, which in my head meant Gammies. On paper, it meant nothing to anyone. Also, people love a story that makes you small. It keeps them comfortable at the table. Okay, Kelsey announced, triumph in her voice as the last label was peeled from the last box. I think that's everyone. Except, Lucy said, bold, her camera strap biting into the soft of her neck, Gammy. The room formatted itself around the question. It tensed. It pretended to have forgotten something it had not. Oh. Kelsey pressed her palm to her chest. Mom, we thought you said you didn't want anything. Did I? I asked. You said, I have everything I need, Matthew offered, relief like a lifeline in his voice, the way people speak when they've found a rule to hide behind. You said the best gift is family together. I did say that, I said. Generally. Well, Kelsey trilled. There we are. There we were. Nobody looked at me directly after that. There's a choreography to guilt. Eyes stick to corners, shoulders rise toward ears. Someone pours more wine they don't drink. Conversation grew on the edges like lichen, slow and clingy. It wasn't that I needed a gift. I'm too old and too practical for that. It was being cut out of the ritual. It was being told to sit and watch everyone be chosen. It was the story of my life, rerun during prime time. Lucy stood abruptly and put her camera down. I made something for Gammy, she said. But it's in my backpack. I forgot. Kelsey smiled the smile she uses for waiters who bring the wrong dessert. Sweetheart, we're doing photos now. Let her, I said, meeting Lucy's eyes. She sat back down, too obedient for my liking. She must learn when to be disobedient. No empire survives without a little strategic rebellion. We took photos. We arranged people by height. We retook a few because Oliver had decided the drone deserved a cameo. We did the thing that families do when they want to prove to themselves that they are one. Then we moved to the dining room for dessert. A trifle, 10 layers of glass and cream pretending to be effortless. A pecan pie I would have preferred with coffee alone at my kitchen table. A plate of cookies the children had feathered with gaudy sprinkles. My fork hovered above all of it, feeling brave. Before we eat, Matthew began, tapping his glass with the side of his knife. I just want to say a few things. He stood, straightening his jacket, his hair a careful map of success. He is handsome in the exact way that gets you extra bread at a restaurant if you smile at the server. This year has been incredible for us. Kelsey made a noise like a violist tuning. And it's also been a year of growth. He looked over at me warmly. We've all learned how to lean on each other. Leaning, I thought, feels different when you are the pillar. My firm took me on as junior partner in July, he said, and the room erupted, though we had already applauded this announcement at a barbecue in August, a brunch in September, and the Halloween party where a skeleton stood in the corner with a sign taped to it, "Ask me about partnership." And, there's exciting news for the new year. Kelsey's hand fluttered to her stomach. More applause. More bright voices. Eyes on the room's youngest woman's belly like it contained a parade. This dessert won't eat itself, I said gently, to save them from rioting. Laughter. We cut in. I ate a piece of pecan pie that tasted like sugar and memory. When I swallowed the last bite, I unfolded the envelope that had been under my plate since before the first ornament was hung. Before I go, I said, because I was going to go, sudden fatigue pressed down on me like snowfall. I brought something. Not a gift. A correction. Matthew's eyes narrowed in confusion. Kelsey froze into politeness. Lucy took a picture of me without looking through the viewfinder, the way you do when you're trying to capture lightning without scaring it away. Oliver chewed his cookie with the steady rhythm of someone watching television. I'm going to tell a story, I said. And then I'm going to ask you to join me at a different table. You're not happy, Matthew said, the defensiveness in his voice so familiar it could have been an old lullaby. Mom, if this is about the gifts. It's not about the gifts, I said. It's about the story you're telling yourself. The one where I am the extra. In the early 2000s, I began. A company called GMY Holdings bought a suite of laundromats and folded them into a logistics arm. We named that arm Oxbow Distribution because it understood that detours make the river, not the other way around. Oxbow learned to deliver on time in storms. Oxbow learned to make small businesses feel like giants because their supplies always arrived before they ran out of excuses. Oxbow also learned to never talk much about who owned it because privacy is a luxury, and I am partial to luxuries you can buy with a check. I laid the deed and the list from the envelope on the tablecloth. Paper on linen makes a sound like a small sail catching wind. Mom, Matthew said slowly, reading the top page. Then again, as if he needed the word to be a ladder to the next thought. Mom. Hello, I said. I'm the majority shareholder of GMY, which holds Oxbow and 4 smaller satellites that recycle, repair, and recover. I am, to use the term I used to make fun of, the boss. No one spoke. Your partnership dinner at the firm, I continued. The wine you splurged on. The suit you hesitated over until you saw yourself in the mirror and said, okay, maybe I can be this man. Who paid for your law school when scholarships didn't fill the bucket and your father was gone? I touched the envelope. You never asked. You never had to. I made sure of it. Mom, Matthew said again, but this time it was a different word entirely. It was a child, staring up at a city of shelves built by an adult. Kelsey reached for the list, then withdrew her hand as if it might burn her. Why didn't you tell us? Because people tell different truths to rich women than they tell to mothers, and I like the mother truths more, I said. Because surprise is not always a punishment. Because I wanted to watch who you were to everyone when you didn't think my ledger could change your voice. Gammy, Lucy breathed, brightening her face like a candle behind parchment. You're a CEO. Not quite. I don't run the day-to-day. Carla does, and she's better than me. I am the quiet end of the table where the checks are signed and the apologies are made. I prefer it that way. Oliver swallowed his cookie, looked at me, and said, with perfect sincerity, can your trucks deliver my drone batteries faster than Amazon? I laughed so hard my ribs ached. Kelsey's cheeks colored. We should have gotten you something, she murmured, eyes wet. You could never have given me what I wanted, I said. I brought it with me. And what's that? Matthew asked in a voice that had lost its edges, softened enough to bruise. A chair, I said. At a table you didn't know existed. I slid the second sheet forward. Tomorrow, anyone who wants to can come with me to the office. We'll eat leftover trifle in the break room with people who work hard enough to turn it into fuel. I will show you the maps. I will show you the driver's Christmas cards. I will introduce you to the woman who made this whole thing sing. Then, if you want, we will talk about the trust that will someday transfer ownership, not to one person, but to a circle with rules. Rules? Kelsey asked faintly, as if the word had betrayed her. Yes, I said. Because I've watched too many people confuse gifts with guarantees. The trust is for education, seed ideas, first homes, safe divorces, new starts, recovered mistakes. Not for boats that no one sails or kitchen remodels that yield more marble than meals. You can be in it. You can also be out of it. You can step in and out more than once. Who decides? Matthew asked. Me now, I said. Then me and Carla and 2 outside members later. At some point, not me at all. I looked at Lucy. Eventually, that panel will include someone under 30. That person will change every 2 years. Lucy did not blink. She did not drop her gaze. Good. She understood the weight of looking back. Kelsey recovered her voice. We're having a baby, she said. A tremble of triumph and fear threaded through. We were going to tell you after dessert. We had a onesie printed that said, Best Gammy. A breath I didn't know I had been holding left me in one long line. I reached across the table, not for the paper, but for her hand. I'm happy for you, I said. Truly. And the gifts, Matthew said. because he is the kind of man who cannot leave a mistake sitting without a caption. Mom, I'm sorry. We messed up. I messed up. We thought you always say you don't need anything. I don't, I said gently. It wasn't a gift I wanted. It was a place in the circle. So I took it. We sat there for a moment, Christmas lights blinking in the dining room mirror like a second tree lived in the wall. Now, I said briskly, the way you talk to employees when you need the truck loaded by 6 a.m. There's one more part. If you want to keep sitting at my table, there are 3 tasks before New Year's. Not big ones, but ones that let me see who you are when you think no one is reporting on you. Kelsey stiffened. Tests? Opportunities, I said. And yes, I like tests. They're how we separate people who can carry a thing from people who can only compliment it. Matthew nodded with relief, a language he recognized returning to the room. What are they? First, I said, volunteer one day somewhere with no cameras, no posts. A soup kitchen. A warehouse that sends medical supplies to clinics. Use your hands. Get tired. Come home with your feet sore and your heart quiet. Second, write a letter to someone you owe, whether it's an apology or a thank you, and hand it to them. Don't email it. Put your breath on it. Third, fix something of yours that's broken. A hinge. A friendship. A lie you told to make things easier. That's it. Kelsey half laughed, half cried. You're serious. As a ledger, I said. As snowfall in January. As a bus schedule. Lucy raised her hand as if we were in church. Can I add one? For me. Go on, I said. We have to all go to the office and see, she said. I need the maps. Done, I said. Oliver slid his plate toward me. Can I add one too? He asked. It's not really a task. Name it, Lieutenant. Can your company sponsor my robotics club? I looked at Matthew, whose eyes said please, and at Kelsey, whose eyes said this would make him unbearable, and then back at Oliver. Yes, I said. Not because it's you. Because it's a good investment. Kelsey exhaled, the day's architecture settling. And the trust, she asked carefully. What happens if we fail your opportunities? Nothing, I said. Not everything is a trapdoor. But I'll know who I want to ask for help when we need to pivot. And we always need to pivot eventually. Matthew, I said a minute later, when the plates were stacked and everyone was still. When your father died, I promised you I'd be enough. I promised you I'd be both people where one used to be. I kept that promise. I won't apologize for doing it so well you didn't see the gears. But I won't let invisibility be the price anymore. Do you understand me? He pressed his napkin to his mouth like he was stopping something, anger, grief, I couldn't tell. He nodded. I understand you, he said finally. And I've been ungrateful. Ungrateful is loud, I said. You were quiet. I shook my head. This family knows how to perform love. We need to practice it instead. The two are not the same. He reached for my hand. I'm sorry, he said. For tonight. For more than tonight. I accept, I said. Now cut me a second slice of pie, because I want to remember forgiving you as sweet. We ate. We talked more gently. Someone took away the camera tripod. The drone went to sleep in a drawer. The candles burned down like time-lapse flowers. We made new rituals without pronouncing them. Later, when the house was soft with the aftermath of guests leaving, the quiet that always follows the chaos of coats and thanks, I put on Matthew's spare boots by the door and went outside. The snow had stopped. The air was a clean knife. I walked to the edge of the driveway and looked up. The stars were doing what stars do, showing up long after everyone had gone to bed, shining because it is their job. Kelsey came out, her coat thrown over her shoulders like a cape. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. Are you angry at me? The question cost her something. I let it. No, I said. But I think you grew up in a house where gifts were apologies. I prefer receipts. She laughed, which meant she understood me. Will you teach me? She asked. I've been trying for a decade, I said dryly, and we both laughed again. Then I softened. Yes, if you'll teach me how to make that trifle. It's just layering, she said. Everything is, I said. We went inside. The next morning, Lucy arrived at my house at 7 with donuts and a notebook and Oliver in tow because he's using my backpack as an excuse to visit your office. I need a better reason, Oliver sniffed. You want to see the forklifts, I said. And possibly drive one. Do not tell Mom, he said. We carried trifle in a cooler like an organ donation. At Oxbow, the skeleton crew that draws holiday shifts cheered when I came in because I always bring coffee. Carla hugged me so hard my ribs creaked and then turned to the children and said, "So you're the board?" "Not yet," Lucy said gravely, "but we're in training." I led them to the operations room. Maps everywhere. Strings, yes, I like a cliché when it works. Screens with blinking dots for trucks. Whiteboards covered in math, so messy it looked like poetry. Oliver put his hands on the edge of the table like it was an altar. Lucy did not take out her camera. She just looked and looked and looked like she was drinking a lake. "See those two trucks?" Carla said, pointing. "There are stubborn ones. They get stuck together in traffic every storm like teenagers holding hands." "Why?" Oliver asked. "Because people call bad traffic a problem," Carla said, "and they stop looking at it as a pattern." She turned to Lucy. "You're a photographer. How do you get motion to look like it's meant to be?" "Longer exposure," Lucy said promptly. "You don't fight the blur. You use it." Carla winked. "Same with trucks. We assign routes with a 10-minute friendship built in." Oliver looked like his brain had opened its curtains. "You cause them to get stuck together." "We give them something to do with stuck," I said. We ate trifle out of paper bowls in the break room. I watched Lucy watch the drivers, the way they ribbed each other and the way their eyes dropped when their mothers texted. I watched Oliver follow a forklift around like a duckling. I watched Carla's hands when she talked, weathered, precise, unafraid of the point. By New Year's, the opportunities were complete, or at least attempted. Matthew took a shift at a shelter that had to turn people away when temperatures dropped. He slept 12 hours afterward, guilt-heavy as a wet coat. Kelsey wrote a letter to her sister she had not spoken to in 3 years. They cried in a driveway and made tacos with store-brand salsa, and then Kelsey brought half the supplies to the office for the driver's lounge. Lucy fixed a friendship by telling the truth. Oliver fixed the garage door and insisted we call a professional after he did, because safety, gammy. I increased the robotics club's sponsorship and made them present a budget like executives. They were better at it than most executives. I rewrote my will. I rewrote the trust's preface, the part future lawyers will skip, but that will let me, through the paper, still look everyone in the eye. It begins. This is not a pot of gold. This is a pantry. We will always feed people before we furnish living rooms. If you want it to be different, start your own pantry. I also wrote one more letter and left it unsealed on my kitchen table because I am not afraid of anyone reading it, least of all the people I love. Dear Matthew, you are an excellent lawyer. Keep your wife's hand steady when the baby comes. Learn to change the diaper fast or don't come to my office bragging about partnership anymore. Apologize quickly. Apologize once. Then change. Dear Kelsey, you did not like me when we met because I could not be dazzled. I respect it. There is room at my table for women who make trifles and strategies with the same patience. Teach me to layer. I'll teach you to ledger. Dear Lucy, you will be the first in the family to sit in the rotating under 30 seat on the panel. Not because you're my favorite. Because you see. Seeing is not the same as filming. Keep the difference safe. Dear Oliver, you may never fly the drone in my living room. You may fly it at the warehouse on Sundays. Bring batteries. The year unspooled like clean tape. Kelsey's belly rose. Matthew learned to cook on Tuesdays because Kelsey's prenatal yoga class made her hungry in a very specific way. Oliver won a small competition and acted like it was a moon landing. Lucy's photos were accepted into a youth gallery show. Every image was of motion, traffic, rivers, crowds, held still long enough for the eye to enter and then leave with something new. At Oxbow, winter arrived with its usual tantrums. One storm in February hit mean and fast, ice drawing hasty signatures on every surface. We were running a skeleton schedule, moving saline and blankets to clinics and churches. Carla built a map of alternate routes the night before. I packed cots and oatmeal because sometimes staying open meant keeping your people fed and horizontal between runs. At 2 in the morning, we got the call you never want. One of our drivers, Jace, had avoided a spin-out only to be boxed in by a jackknifed semi. He was fine, His voice on the phone was steady, even amused. But he had a truck full of pediatric antibiotics and a ticking clock. "We can't wait for dawn," Carla said. "We'll have shortages by noon." "We won't," I said. "Not if we do the old trick." The old trick is not glamorous. It's not a montage with upbeat music. The old trick is buying time by buying silence. We loaded 2 cargo vans with the most urgent crates and sent them on foot for parts of the route. Yes, on foot. 4 of our warehouse guys took climbing spikes and highway vests and moved like winter goats in reflective orange. They passed the crates across the concrete barrier like a bucket brigade. On the other side, the vans swallowed them up and disappeared into alleys we knew better than the city did. It was slow. It was careful. It was a small miracle that no one would clap for, which is how you know it was worth doing. By dawn, the clinics had their meds. Jace and the jackknifed semi were free. Carla called a city dispatcher she'd played cards with 40 years ago and suggested they post the salt trucks where we'd seen the ice bloom because, as she put it, "We already did your job while you were sleeping. Come finish it." The dispatcher laughed and did. Lucy wrote an essay about that night for school. Her teacher told her it read like a script for a film where the hero is logistics. "Exactly," Lucy said. "Grandma says the most exciting stories are about what we do when no one is looking." Spring came. The warehouse doors, aching and noisy all winter, sighed. The drivers wore baseball caps again instead of knitted armor. Kelsey gave birth in May to a small person who looked like every baby and no baby, whose fingers opened and closed like he was counting the days. They named him Theo. He cried with conviction and slept in passionate bursts. Kelsey's mother came to stay for a week and polished everything in reach, including the dog. I put a bassinet in my office. Not because I planned to babysit at work, but because I wanted to sit a while and remember that every empire I built had to fit inside a car seat at some point. 3 weeks after Theo was born, Matthew's firm asked him to handle a case that glittered on paper and felt dirty in the hand. A client wanted to shortchange a set of subcontractors by reclassifying them after the work was done. He brought the details to my kitchen, where Theo slept in a sling and Lucy edited photos on my couch, and Oliver pretended not to listen while building a machine that could sort nails by length. "They'll give me more if I take it," Matthew said. "More cases. More visibility. More. "I know that hunger," I said. "But if you eat the wrong thing, you don't get stronger. You get sick." "It's legal," he said. "So is leaving the light on in an empty room," I said. "Still costs you." He took a walk, came back, and declined the case with a letter that made his partner proud. He did not get punished. He got trusted with a different client a month later who paid on time and appreciated accuracy more than bravado. It is not always that neat, but it was that time, and sometimes that's enough to teach a spine where to stand. By autumn, Oxbow had become the kind of mid-sized success that makes bigger fish curious. They invited me to lunches with heavy cutlery. They sent me decks with glossy pages and graphs that climbed like ivy. They promised synergies and resource integration and unlocking value, phrases that can mean rescue and can mean gutting. I listened carefully, complimented the color choices, and watched who said drivers first and who said margins first. I don't mind margins. I love margins. Margins let you pay for braces and brakes and the piano teacher who changed Lucy's hands. But you can tell a lot about a person by whether they can say the word people without smiling like they have a secret. One company, bigger than us by a factor of 10, came courting with earnestness and numbers that would have made a younger me dizzy. They were efficient. They were proud of their software. They floated the idea of a sale that would make my family comfortable for 3 generations. I asked about sick days. They said the algorithm would optimize downtime. I asked about the friendship buffers. They said traffic was an inefficiency to be ironed out. I asked about Carla. They said managers were replaceable. Everyone is replaceable, I said. That's not the point. I sold to them anyway. People think selling is failure or betrayal. Sometimes it is discipline. Sometimes it is a test. Sometimes you let someone show you who they are with your own name on their letterhead, and then you make your next move. We signed at the end of the year. I stressed the driver's transition packages until the lawyers rubbed their eyes. I kept my mouth closed when the new managers came in with shoes that cost a mortgage payment and told us that the board wanted faster turns, tighter routes, zero slack. Slack, one of them said, is the enemy. Slack, I said, is where you breathe. They reduced the friendship buffers. They replaced Carla's whiteboards with screens no one knew how to fix. They cut the free coffee in the break room because perks can be perceived as waste. They moved holidays to floating days that made childcare a riddle. They installed sensors in the cabs to monitor engagement. They sent emails at 11 at night and called it hustle. They called me twice for advice and ignored it both times. Then the metrics dipped. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But like a tire with a slow leak, everything lost shape. Deliveries arrived on time but wrong. Routes were fast on paper and sluggish in reality. Drivers called out sick more often because there was nothing to come back to accept a checklist. Clients we had kept for 20 years started asking careful questions. The numbers the board loved so much could not explain why outcomes felt worse even when outputs were higher. They offered me a consulting contract to help fix what they had broken. I suggested a different arrangement. Sell it back, I said. You don't like owning it. I can tell. It doesn't do what you want. One of the executives blinked, surprised. He was young enough to think all problems had a lever you just had to find. For what price? For what you'll spend in the next quarter failing to fix it, I said. Maybe less. Possibly $1 if you decide to get smart fast. They laughed. Then they tried more dashboards. Then they called me. We repurchased Oxbow for a symbolic $1 and a handshake on a non-compete that only applied to the kind of business I didn't want anyway. They asked me not to gloat publicly. I told them I don't believe in public gloating. It makes the wrong people clap. I brought Carla back with back pay and a bouquet so big it looked like a parade float. She walked into the operations room and touched the new screens like petting a dog that didn't trust her yet. We'll keep some of this, she said. Throw out the rest. What do we keep? I asked. The heat map, she said. The part that admits we're human. We reinstalled the friendship buffers. We returned the coffee. We changed the sensors' jobs from tattling to reminding drivers when to stretch. We didn't go back in time. We went forward with better footing. Meanwhile, the family kept unfolding like a map you cannot refold the same way. Theo learned to clap, then to crawl, then to find every single hazard in a room and attempt to befriend it. Kelsey returned to work part-time at the office, which surprised me and her both. She had a talent for making messy data legible. She would stand over a spreadsheet with her hair in a knot and mutter to herself, then snap, there, and the columns would lean into place like soldiers who finally heard the right command. She and I had our first quiet fight in the break room when she suggested we could replace a driver with a third-party gig platform for late-night runs. It's cheaper and faster, she said, showing me a graph that, I admit, was persuasive. It is cheaper, I said. It is faster. It is also untrue. Data doesn't lie, she said. Data doesn't lie, I agreed. People do. People will tell you they can deliver in half the time for half the price. They believe it when they're looking at a screen. Then they get in a truck on a Tuesday night in February when their kid has a fever and their babysitter canceled and they are human again. She looked at me for a long time, then nodded once. So we try a pilot with guardrails, she said. And we stack it with incentives for the people who actually do the job. Now you sound like Oxbow, I said. The pilot worked in summer and failed in winter. We kept the parts that worked and threw out the rest. Kelsey wrote a memo titled What Works When Winter Has Opinions. The drivers laughed so hard they taped it to the fridge. Oliver started high school. He built a robot that could vacuum the warehouse between shifts, then turned it into a fundraiser where you could name a robot movement after your pet. It raises more if people feel foolish, he said. Foolishness is a currency. He applied for a grant with a proposal that made me blink. Teach robotics basics to the driver's kids on Saturdays in exchange for a small stipend and a lot of pizza. Long game, he said. You want good employees? Grow them. Lucy got into a summer program that paired photographers with nonprofit work. She chose a food bank that had never had a marketing budget but needed one. Her images showed hands, not faces. Stacked cans, not sad eyes. Motion, not stillness. She told the truth without pity, which is what good images do. And Matthew, well, Matthew learned to be wrong out loud. He would say, I spoke sharply, or I overpromised, or I didn't read the room. The earth did not open. He did not fall in. He apologized once, then changed, which is the hardest part of apologizing. 2 years after the first Christmas, we hosted the holiday dinner at the Oxbow warehouse because the house felt too small for what we had become. We strung lights along the rafters and used pallets as low tables for the kids. Drivers stopped by on their way to shifts and on their way home. The trifle was layered in 2 enormous clear storage tubs because Kelsey said, truthfully, that a bowl was a lie. I wore a sweater Lucy knit with a skyline along the hem that looked like a heartbeat. When it came time for gifts, there were 4 envelopes with my name on them. The first was from Lucy, a small book of photographs of hands at work, drivers, bakers, mechanics, a teacher writing a word on a board. On the title page she wrote, "We don't disappear when we do it right. We make room." The second from Oliver, a tiny 3D, printed forklift painted gold, fixed to a wooden base with a switch that, when flipped, lit a small LED headlamp. A plaque read, "In case of darkness, proceed with curiosity." The third from Matthew, a donation, in my name, to the women's shelter where he'd volunteered, with a note that said, "For the mothers who fix what breaks and hand us the tools." He had not bought me anything. He had bought a future. The fourth from Kelsey, a ledger, bound in navy cloth, with a year embossed on the spine. Inside, on the first page, a single sentence in neat handwriting, "Teach me your math." "Tomorrow morning," I said, tapping the ledger. 9 a.m., bring coffee. "I'll bring the trifle," she said. "We have forks," I said. "Bring questions." After dessert, when the toddlers made sugar angels on the concrete and the older kids discovered that rolling chairs are essentially carnival rides, I stood on a pallet and tapped a glass. "Before everyone scatters," I said, "I have, not a gift, a pattern." They laughed. A few drivers groaned in exaggerated dread. Carla crossed her arms like a happy bouncer. "You may have heard we sold Oxbow to a company that did not understand it," I said. "You may have heard we bought it back for what amounts to $1 and a lesson fee. Here's the pattern. We will keep doing that when necessary. Not because we like drama. Because sometimes you teach by letting people try to put square wheels on. Our job is to keep the road available when they realize it's not working." "Is there cake?" someone yelled. "There is trifle," I yelled back. "Cake's cousin with better posture." The winter after that, we got an email from the original company's new CEO. He was young, the kind who reads business books on airplanes and underlines every sentence twice. He wanted to visit and learn from the elders. He meant it kindly. He meant it, period, and that is rare. He came for a day. He sat on the break room couch that sinks in the middle and ate the chili that tastes like Thursdays. He asked to see the friendship buffers. He took notes. He said, "Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" And I said, "They did. You weren't shaped to hear it." He asked if we would consider consulting. We said yes, with conditions. We were not interested in a legacy shaped like a fortress. We wanted a bridge. On the day he left, Lucy snapped a photo of him standing in front of the map wall with his coat over his arm, looking smaller than he did at arrival because humility had taken up space. She titled it "A Man Realizes the World Has Edges He Didn't Know About." He bought a print. He hung it in his office. When he made a decision later that cost him quarterly glitter and earned him yearly trust, he sent us a note that said, "Your wall and that photo were louder than my board. Thank you." Theo learned to say my name with his own rules. He called me Ga, then Mommy, then settled on Gammy, which made me sound like a game, and I did not mind. He matched socks with serious attention. He cheered when the trucks honked. He took a nap on a stack of shipping blankets because he could smell the sun in them. And I, old dog with new tricks, learned to show up in the photos. Not because I needed my face preserved, but because the story needed a witness with wrinkles. When you erase the older people from the frame, you teach the young ones that they have to vanish to be gracious. I refused. One afternoon the following spring, Oliver ran into my office with a look that meant either a disaster or a breakthrough. "Gammy," he panted. "The robotics club needs a field trip. Not to the warehouse. To the city routing center." They said no unless we have a sponsor with a logistics license. I have a logistics license, I said. At least 6 laminated cards in my wallet say I can walk anywhere with a hard hat. They're not enough, he said. They want an adult. I tilted my head at him. A different adult, he amended. Not you. Someone who doesn't love me. I nodded, impressed by the clarity. You're right. I'll ask Carla. Carla took them. The kids returned subdued, eyes full of screens and the realization that the world is built by people whose names are not in the credits. Oliver said only they had a wall of lost umbrellas. He looked ready to build an umbrella tracker right then. Lucy, meanwhile, began a project that scared me in a way I respect. She wanted to photograph invisible infrastructure, not just roads and trucks and pipes, but the people who get up at 4 to unlock, to clean, to stock. She asked permission like a professional. She kept her lens where it belonged. She refused to take a shot that made someone small. At her show, a gallery-goer said, "These look like portraits of saints," and Lucy said, "They are. The quiet kind." Matthew took Theo to a father-son breakfast at his firm and came back irritated and amused. They set up a photo booth with props, he said. I wore a feather boa because Theo insisted. I am now the desktop background of 3 senior partners. Good, I said. You're a lesson that good men wear boas when toddlers command. Kelsey and I fought twice that year, cleanly. Once about a manager she wanted to promote who dazzled rooms but made his team smaller to seem bigger. Once about a spreadsheet she triple-checked that still had a wrong assumption at its core. We spoke with respect, then loudly, then with respect again. We did not sulk. We did not punish. We ended in the break room eating carrots dipped in hummus and laughing at ourselves. At home, she told Matthew she had finally learned how to disagree without packing a suitcase in her head. He said, "My mother specializes in teaching that." By the time the 3rd Christmas rolled around since my first envelope, the tradition had turned inside out. We still exchanged gifts. But the main event was something else, an hour where each person presented one decision from the year that made their life better and one decision that did not and what they learned. We clapped for both. We thanked people for their mistakes and meant it. This is where the story could end. The arc is tidy. The woman no one noticed at the table stands up, reveals her empire, and then builds a larger table with more chairs and better soup. But tidy endings are for picture books. Real life is compost, layered, sometimes smelly, always turning into tomorrow. So here is the messiness that kept us honest. A driver we loved relapsed and lied and then told the truth and started over. We paid for rehab. We kept his job available. He came back, heavier with humility, lighter with relief. He now runs the safety talks and cries every 3rd one. No one mocks him. The mockers are not invited to the room. A client we considered family refused to pay during a cash crunch and tried to use friendship as leverage. I showed them the ledger. We negotiated a plan that kept them alive and kept us speaking. It still stung. A storm took out our loading dock for 2 weeks. We built a temporary one out of scaffolding and stubbornness. It was ugly and perfect. The architect who designed our original dock visited and said, "I hate it." I said, "That's how I know it works." I got sick for a minute, nothing dramatic, a whisper in the lungs, but long enough to scare Matthew and make Kelsey reorganize our passwords. Lucy and Oliver showed up with soup and homework, and that look teenagers get when they can see the edges of a life for the first time. I recovered. I cleaned the pantry because I fight fear with labels. Theo learned to say no without crying. We applauded. And then the letter arrived. It came on a Tuesday in April from a firm that specializes in acquiring underperforming community assets and turning them around. They wanted the laundromats. The ones I had kept out of love and loyalty. The origin story that still smells like detergent and hope. They offered a fair number. They promised to make them efficient and modern. It would have been easy. It would have been clean. It would have felt like completion. I drove to the first laundromat that night and sat in the little plastic chairs shaped for waiting. A woman with a baby on her hip folded towels with one hand. A man read a paperback book with a cracked spine. 2 teenagers shared earbuds and whispered in fragments. The change machine wheezed and delivered. The bulletin board was full: dog walkers, piano teachers, a flyer for a neighborhood watch meeting that promised donuts, and everyone saying we should do this more often until June. Carla sat beside me and did not speak for a full 5 minutes, which is why I have trusted her for 20 years. Not everything old is sacred, I said finally. No, she said. But some things are seeds. You don't sell a seed just because the garden looks tidy without it. I declined the offer. I raised prices just enough to keep the door smart. I replaced 2 machines. I added a bookshelf. I hired a teenager named Avni who wanted to practice English with customers and had a way of making angry people sit down and breathe. When she left for college 2 years later on a scholarship Lucy bullied the board into creating, she made me a bracelet out of blue thread and a washer. I wear it under my sleeve on days I need to remember where the math started. Last December, for years after the first Christmas when I was missed on purpose, we did something outrageous. We gave everyone nothing. We put a sign on the table that read, "No presents this year. Stories only." And then, one by one, in a warehouse that smelled like cinnamon and oil, we told a single story each about a time we chose patience over spectacle. It was the quietest, loudest celebration I have ever seen. And here, because I promised you a clickbait Bible twist at the middle of the story, is the companion reveal you didn't know you were waiting for. I am not the only one with an empire. In July, Kelsey came to me with a proposal thick as a summer storm. She wanted to build a small, humane data cooperative for the family-owned businesses we serve, a place where they could pool sales and shipment data anonymously to see trends without being swallowed by platforms that would monetize their breath. They're isolated, she said. They are brilliant alone. They could be world-class together. She had a board in mind, half owners, half workers. Profits would go back to the members after we paid for the servers and the small team that made the numbers sing. The fee would be low enough to include the stubborn and the skeptical. She asked for seed money, then told me she'd get it elsewhere if I said no. I said yes, of course. But I loved her more for the threat. They launched in November with 30 businesses. In 6 months, they saved 3 from closing by spotting the cliff before the owners did. They helped a bakery move from cupcakes to breakfast sandwiches because the data said the neighborhood woke up earlier than it used to. They told a florist to carry more lilies on Thursdays. They advised a mechanic to stop stocking a part that had fallen out of favor. It was small. It was a miracle anyway. At Christmas, when the gifts returned in their quiet forms, Kelsey handed me an envelope. Inside was a 1-page report written in clean, spare language. GMY. Cooperative Year 1, projected. Members, 96. Employee owners, 12. Emergency grants issued, 7. Average revenue lift for members, 7%. Days we were proud, all, but especially the ones where no one noticed. Is it an empire? She asked, eyes lit with a question I recognized from my own past. Yes, I said. Because it is not about you. We hugged. The ledger between us felt like a vow. So that's the long of it, longer than you asked for, maybe longer than you thought you wanted. I was forgotten at a Christmas table. I revealed my empire. Then I built a bigger one and gave pieces away and watched with satisfaction as the people I loved founded their own. We still have pecan pie. We still have candles Kelsey insists are unscented for the ambience. We still have drones that find the most inappropriate moment to ascend. But now, when the names are read and the gifts are passed and the laughter rises in predictable pitches, there is a chair with my name on it that no one forgets. Not because of the envelopes I slide under plates, not because of the companies with their tidy press releases, not because of the money that moves like weather from one ledger to another. Because I asked to be seen. Because I showed my math. Because I invited them to do theirs. And, for the record, the pen they gave me that second Christmas runs out of ink faster than any pen I've ever owned. I refill it every few months. I like to imagine it burns the ink up because of friction, the speed of signing, the pace of decisions, the pressure of someone who knows the difference between gifts and chairs. Last week I found Lucy's first envelope in a drawer, our story seed. I read the driver's Christmas cards again. I drove to the laundromat and folded a stranger's towels because she had a baby on her hip and patience is an empire too. I came home to a note on my kitchen table in Kelsey's neat hand. Tonight at 8, bring the ledger. Theo wants to learn to add. 8 o'clock came. Theo climbed into my lap with the seriousness of a small accountant and the glee of a boy who thinks numbers are a game. We opened the book. We put our breath on the page.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe. Bye bye.